gold would be revalued higher by governments during the first reset. And that really doesn't do anything because it does not eradicate fiat. And even a central bank digital currency is still fiat. So once that fails, and he didn't think it would take much more than maybe six months to a year to see that fiat system fail, then you would have the real reset where derivatives across the board fail and all assets reset versus each other to true clearing prices. 5 or 6 years ago, he was talking about $50,000 gold, and I pointed out to him that just to cover the on-books U.S. debt at the time, like I said, this was, say, 4 years ago, the number had to be 125,000 pounds. And that's assuming again that we do have that gold. I don't assume that. J.D. Vance devaluing the dollar. I mean, that's a short-term fix. It's basically admitting that, you lost the war or lost the battle. And devaluing the dollar, I mean, there's many different facets to it, but it is definitely inflationary. And it definitely will hurt the central banks that hold treasuries as reserves, because those will immediately go down overnight as soon as the devaluation starts. And once you have countries at this point, for the last several years, have been accumulating gold at the fastest pace, in recent history. And the reason being, they understand that there's going to be either a dollar devaluation or a dollar implosion. So what they're doing is they're filling their balance sheet up with gold. It will naturally get revalued higher when the value of the dollar drops, because if it takes more dollars to buy a cup of coffee, it's going to take more dollars to buy an ounce of gold. And as far as the Bitcoin thing is concerned, they're talking about borrowing off of the supposed gold that we have, 8,300 tons or whatever. It hasn't been audited since the 1950s. But assuming we do have the 8,300 tons, then what if they revalue that gold from $42 an ounce and they revalue it, that's going to raise somewhere around $600 billion. And the proposal is to buy Bitcoin. So you're going to encumber all the gold that's supposedly there, and I don't believe it is, but you'll encumber all of that gold, and they're going to put that money into Bitcoin. So they're going to take 600 billion and hopefully pay off 35 trillion now. A year from now, it'll be 37, 38. I mean, that number is going up a trillion every 100 days. Now, I don't know when, 6 months from now, a year, 5 years, whatever. Hopefully we don't find out that Bitcoin is nothing but digital air, and it's just a perfect accounting system of digital nothings. Because if that's the case, then we pissed our entire gold reserve down the drain into something that's worthless. And that is my personal opinion, that these digital currencies, we're going to find out that they are digital air.
Okay, that will certainly will be interesting to see how a lot of things respond, especially with some of the things we see coming our way. Now, with all that said, Bill, perhaps the takeaway to me from this Bitcoin Strategic Fund and Fed Gold Reserve certificates shows that they're aware of it. I mean, I hope that wouldn't come as a surprise, but we've heard other central banks in Germany and the Netherlands, some of their central bankers make interesting comments. There hasn't been a formal announcement, but while we don't know this for sure until something like it happens, do you ultimately expect that there will be some form of central bank or government-induced revaluation at some point?
There has to be. There has to be, because the fiat is going to collapse, which means the debt structure collapses. They have to have uh, the gold that's on their books, they're going to have to revalue higher to fill up the holes that are created by defaulted or much discounted treasuries of various sovereign countries.
Okay, and perhaps if you could add on to that, some of the things that you and Jim Sinclair had talked about. I know he had some particular structures in multiple stages of how he thought it was going to happen. And as you're answering that, if you can distinguish between the stuff he was speculating, or was there this was based on that revealing confidential source, but the context of the information.
Yeah, no, I mean, he heard things, and basically, in the end, it was a speculation. And he thought that gold would be revalued higher by governments during the first reset. And that really doesn't do anything because it does not eradicate fiat. And even a central bank digital currency is still fiat. So once that fails, and he didn't think it would take much more than maybe six months to a year to see uh, that fiat system fail, then you would have the real reset where derivatives across the board fail and all assets reset versus each other to true clearing prices. And
Okay.
if you go back, I mean, this was 5 or 6 years ago. He was talking about $50,000 gold, and I pointed out to him that just to cover the on books U.S. debt at the time, like I said, this was say 4 years ago, um, the number had to be 125,000 pounds.
And Bill,
And that's assuming again that we do have that gold. I don't assume that.
okay, and it seems like we're approaching somewhat of an environment much like what you're describing there, because you and I have been talking about this really since shortly after Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. There was a lot of talk for a long time about they don't like the dollar, they don't think it's a good system. We had the temporary gold backing, and then there's been things that have come out, speculation, although earlier this year, Pepe Escobar and others were reporting that now things are taking the next step forward. And we hear that something where there's a white paper for something called the unit, which Sergei Glaziev has talked about. And then Pepe Escobar reporting a couple of months ago, unit has already received backing by the BRICS Business Council on the roadmap for the October meeting. And then a month later, he reported Putin had a special meeting with the president of the BRICS New Development Bank, and they did talk about the bank's unit plan. So again, here we have the 40% gold backing. So is this perhaps the fit in with what you and Jim are imagining might be the type of way that something like that could unfold?
Well, yeah, I mean, what you've got, the BRICS basically were formed because that group of nations wants free and fair and honest settlement. And the way it has been is that they ship real goods to the United States and we ship them dollars. The dollars are basically nothings because the Treasury and the Fed can print unlimited amounts of dollars to make payment so they don't default, but they have no value. So yeah, I mean that's why the BRICS originally that's why it started because you had nations that wanted to move away from the dollar, and that move started one day after the U.S. said that they were going to confiscate the $300 billion of Russian treasuries. You had, I mean, you got nations all over the world looking at Russia as the strongest military, thinking, well, hey, if they can do that to Russia, they can do that to us. So that's why they're scrambling to gold.
Yeah, and Bill, in there, you mentioned the confiscation of the assets. We talked about this 2 years ago, not trying to brag about being right, although I'll say you were right. I was just tagging along for the ride. I'll give you the credit where we were worried about I mean, and that was right at the time period where the record central bank gold buying began. Now we had Russia respond with some of their own sanctions a couple months earlier. And then something that I didn't hear many other people mention, but this was about a month ago, US banks to begin reporting Russian assets for eventual forfeiture under the new law. So the Treasury, which could de facto be the president, because this came out shortly after Biden allegedly signed that memo giving half the power over to Janet Yellen, but you see start disclosing Russian assets for eventual forfeiture. It seems like, regardless of what one thinks should be done with those assets, not going to be received well by Putin. And it's almost like every red line you see there, it's still like jamming it in your face and escalating towards a less ideal outcome for humans just trying to live on planet Earth.
Well, I mean, that is an exact example of the United States as a banana republic. I mean, mathematically, from a financial standpoint, the US is broke. I mean, we're way past 100% debt to GDP. That article right there shows, from a judicial standpoint, we are a banana republic and do not recognize the rule of law unless it fits our narrative.
Bill, do you have any updated thoughts on when we get to the point where you start seeing that number in silver investment start to significantly grow larger, which is perhaps the thing that stood between the money printing and having a longer lasting higher price between 2011 and now, and what I would think would ultimately be required?
That would require time, and I don't think we have time. First off, I'm on the record saying I think there's less than a 50-50 chance that we even have an election here in the US. I don't think there's a lot of time that even if we have an election, that the market holds together and does not collapse. And I think when all is said and done, I've been adamant about this for 10 years now, when all is said and done, silver is going to blow up and blow up the entire derivatives complex by a failure to deliver. Because you've got so much naked paper out there, and at some point in time, an event will happen, and it may not even be an event. It may be just one wealthy individual who says, before he gets the tap on the shoulder saying, don't do it, he puts an order for 5 billion in and blows the entire market up because he says, I want it delivered. So there's going to be a failure to deliver, and it will start, in my opinion, in silver.